Hey everyone, this is day 7 of learning Java with Code Catalyst Academy. Today, we're going to be talking about methods and classes. Let's start with methods. Methods are pieces of code that can be repeatedly called. They are easier to recycle, especially if the piece of code is larger. So, for example, if I have like 40 lines of complex math that I need to use in multiple spots in my code, instead of having to manually re-enter that everywhere else, I can put that all under one method and then call that method wherever I need to use all of those equations. It makes it a lot easier to recycle and saves time. These are called functions in other languages, so if you know what a function is, that's what a method is. You'll have to state its access type and return type. So access type is what is needed to access this method, and then the return type is what type is returned. Is it an integer, a double, a float, etc. If it doesn't return anything, it's a void method. So you can see here, if it returns an int, it's an integer method. If it doesn't return anything, it's a void method. Next, let's talk about objects and classes. Classes are groups of objects that share similar properties and behavior. Objects are just instances or more specific subclassifications of classes. An example of a class would be the type student. An object would be the name of any student. Here we use Alex or Ashwin, two of the tutors here. Let's look at an example of how a class looks like. You have the actual creation of a class. You have the instance variables. The instance variables are the variables that are needed for the class to run. These are repeatedly called. You have the constructors that give a value or assign something to the instance variables. And lastly, you have the methods. The methods are what the class actually does. So you may have a method for like estimating age or whatever. And basically, it's what the class actually does with the information from these two. So what's the difference between public and private? We've been seeing this word private pop up quite a bit. So what does that mean? So when something is public, that means it can be visible from anywhere. Private means it can only be accessed in its respective class. So for example, let's go back up here. We see these three instance variables. They all say private. That means only in this class can they be used. If they said public, then they can be used anywhere in the code, even outside the class. Private means only in the class, public means anywhere. That's the main difference. I'll just put a check mark here too. Next, let's talk about inheritance. Inheritance is what it sounds like. It's the same way you inherit traits from your parents. So, for example, I inherited my black hair from my parents. It basically is when a subclass draws from or inherits certain elements from a superclass. So for in this example, the subclass would be the kid and the superclass would be the parent. The parent allows the kid to inherit different things. Sometimes the subclass adds extra modifiers such as extra members or methods. The super keyword can be used to reference the parent class constructor in a subclass because the child class inherits all public methods and instant variables from parents, but they don't inherit the constructor. That's the only thing they don't inherit. So once again, let's say I have a parent class and a child class. If I use the word extends, if I say child extends parent, if I say child extends parent, I'm just going to write P because I don't think I have space. You have child extends parent. Now all of the stuff in here, all the methods and instance variables are extended to the child class. And if I use super and then followed with whatever is needed to do the constructor, then I can also use the constructor. So here's an example. We have our original class, teacher, that would be our super class, and we have our subclass, student. So look at this real quick. As soon as we use this word extends, all of these instance variables are transferred. However, this constructor right here, that is not transferred because extending something does not allow the subclass to inherit the constructor. So instead, we use the word super followed by whatever is needed to fulfill the parameter of the constructor, which now allows us to access the constructor. Let's look at a quick inheritance practice problem. Yeah, I'll give you 5 seconds to read and answer. If you need more time, please pause the video. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you chose answer D, you are right. The reason being, let's look at the problem. What is the problem saying? What is printed when the following code is executed? Student S equals new grad student, so we're focusing on this class, the subclass, system.out.println.getInfo. So we go to getInfo. Super.getInfo goes up here and gets studying. However, in the end, we are returning eating. So the reason why it's not studying is because in grad student, we aren't returning studying, we're returning eating. So in the end, the answer would be eating. Next, let's talk about polymorphism. What this literally means is many-shaped. So this basically means when many classes related to each other are in inheritance. There are two types, overloading, which is when two methods share the same name and function even though they have different parameters. And overriding. A subclass provides a different implementation of an existing superclass method. So let's look at examples of overriding. We have our main class right here. This is just the main class. Then we have the superclass. So this is the class that allows the inheritance to happen, right? So this is the original, like the parent. And in this we have make a noise. That's one of our methods here, make a noise. And then now we have our subclass. This is what is inheriting from the parent class. Here we have the same exact method where it says make a noise, but now instead of saying animal noise, it says wolf. And the reason being, this is an override. It's overriding this method with a new method that's in the dog class. And then next we have another method, but the parameters are different. This is an example of overloading. Two methods share the same name and function. Well, it doesn't share the exact same function, but two methods share the same name and have different parameters. This one has one parameter and will then loop the word wolf over and over until the for loop is finished. So that's an example of overriding, where you have one method in the superclass that does something, and then the same method in the subclass that does something else. Here's an example of overloading polymorphism. So we have our original class right here. We have our class right here, and then we have all three of these, which are the same in terms of name. However, the parameters for all of them are different, and thus the returns are also different. And when the parameters are different, but the name is the same, that is overloading. They happen in one class. Next, let's talk about try-catch statements. Try statement defines block of code that is tested for errors during execution. Defines block of code that is executed if an error occurs in the try block. So let's look at this. That explanation was written poorly. I think it was Ashwin or Alex who made these slides, so do better. Anyway, the try. The try is kind of this experimental code that you're checking to see if it works. So for example here, we have this array, and if you remember anything about arrays, this doesn't work because it goes 0, 1, 2. There is no 3. Therefore, it doesn't work and it will go to the catch. The catch will run if it doesn't work. If the try doesn't work, the catch will run. Something went wrong. That's what would be printed. If there is no error, the catch will not happen. Next, let's talk about comments. Comments are super important in Java because you want to be able to know and note down like whether there's a problem somewhere or whether there's something you want another coder to know. None of the green text is touched by the compiler, so this is only for us. It means there is no the computer cannot see those, and the output isn't affected by them either. So it's literally only for people to look at and make sense of the code, or write down little comments of oh yeah, this part isn't working, or this part is doing this. And lastly, let's talk about documentation. Documentation is also very important. You can learn more about it in this website, but to narrow it down, you have the parameters, and you have the return, what it's returning. And then you have the throws. So what that means is the parameters are what's needed for this to run. The return is what's being run, and the throws are exceptions if you put integers instead of strings. Lastly, we have a bit of homework. You can go into REPL and do this exercise. It'll be really helpful to solidify how methods, classes, inheritance works. And with that, that's the end of the video. I hope you better understood the differences in classes, objects, methods, how to use inheritance, and yeah, stick around for the next videos that are going to be coming.